Good evening. I'd like to call this Wednesday, September 11th, 2024 meeting of the City of Manassas Park Planning Commission to order. The time is 7 p.m. My name is Lester Finkel. Sitting this evening are Kevin Petak, John Evans, Alana Mensing, and Michael Beckett's. The first item of business is the moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Evans, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. No changes to the agenda this evening. Would anyone care to make a motion to approve the agenda as is?
Moved.
Motion, second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item of business are two meeting minutes to adopt this evening. We first have the June 12th, 2024 meeting minutes. I've offered a few edits. Any other changes to the meeting minutes? Seeing none, would anyone care to make a motion to adopt the June 12th, 2024 meeting minutes as amended?
So moved.
Motion, second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstention. Yeah.
Abstention. Motion carries unanimously, 4 with 1 abstention. Next agenda item, same agenda item, but just next meeting minutes is July 16th, 2024. Any edits to that one? I didn't see any either. Then I'll ask for a motion to adopt the July 16th, 2024. It was our portion of the joint meeting with the governing body. So is anyone make a motion to adopt those meeting minutes?
Moved.
Motion, second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstention.
An abstention. Motion carries unanimously with 1 abstention. This time, any members of the public here to speak? Seeing none, we'll move along. Our first item this evening is a presentation, Dominion 230 kV electric transmission partial rebuild project. I understand we have Administrator Odell. Director, actually, sorry.
Good evening, Chairman Finkel, Commissioners, citizen staff, and guests. Calvin Odell, the Director of Community Development. I believe we have Steve Hall, the Transportation Program Manager, on the phone. While I'm pulling up the presentation, he can introduce our guests from Dominion Power.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Calvin. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, staff, guests. My name is Calvin mentioned. I'm Steve Hall, the Transportation Program Manager for the city. I apologize I couldn't be in person tonight. Got a kid running around here. But this evening you'll be receiving an informational presentation from Dominion Energy staff on the Clifton Winters Branch Line 2011 electrical transmission partial rebuild project. This is the line that runs through the city along the Norfolk Southern Rail Line and through Blooms Park before crossing over Bull Run into Fairfax County. Since late 2022, when first learning of the project, I've been the primary point of contact and I've been proactively coordinating with Dominion and their staff on this upcoming work. We've held numerous meetings, exchanged regular information with the Dominion team, and then accordingly with city staff to make sure all parties have been informed since late 22. The presentation this evening will provide an overview of the project, location and heights of the structures, the areas impacted notably. There will be some work in the VRE surface lot as well as Blooms Park, and the construction timeline. We do have, I believe, 3 members of the Dominion team present this evening. That would be Miss Jenna Brown. She is the primary presenter. She's the senior communications specialist. We have Miss Hannah Hurst. Senior Siting and Permitting Specialist for Electric Transmission. Ms. Hurst has been my primary point of contact and project manager since another individual transitioned out. And Ms. Yolanda Green is present. She's with External Affairs for Fairfax and Prince William. So without any further ado, I would give you Jenna.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, Chairman and Commissioners. It's great to be with you. As Steve said, my name is Jenna Brown. I'm a Communications Specialist at Dominion supporting this project and just want to give you some information. But first, I want to start with just setting where we are in the energy landscape in Northern Virginia. I'm sure many of you are familiar, but we have a lot of changes and a lot of growth, and there are a few factors primarily driving that. The first being electrification. We're adding a lot of electric vehicles and other electric technologies onto the grid, which is just increasing our demands there. There are also data centers. You all know this, but increasing in the number, the size, and the energy needs as these become more efficient as well. So that is straining our grid, placing additional demands on our grid. And then lastly, integrating renewable energy resources just changes how we operate and changes our constantly evolving grid. So all of these things contribute to the need for transmission projects like the one we'll discuss tonight. So the project specifically is the rebuild of an existing electric transmission line through the city of Manassas, the city of Manassas Park, Prince William County, and Fairfax County. The rebuild is necessary to maintain reliable energy across the region as some of those forces increase demand for energy. And what our scope is to rebuild a 7.25 mile transmission line. We'll be upgrading the conductor to handle a higher capacity at the 230 kilovolt voltage, which is what we have today. We'll operate at that voltage in the future, but we will have an improved line doing that. And we need to rebuild the supporting structures to support that upgraded conductor as well. I will add that this is a partial rebuild of what is a full transmission line planned between Clifton Substation in Fairfax County and Winters Branch Substation. The portion that you see in blue on the map here is a new portion. The portion in yellow, which is, of course, what impacts Manassas Park, is a rebuild. So the structures that you can expect to see after the line is rebuilt will be very similar to what we currently have in the size and the appearance. It is the brown weathering steel monopole structures with just a single circuit, so the arms on one side. But the new structures are going to be about 5 feet taller on average. To get a deeper dive on each individual structure, we do have a tool on the project website, which you can see here. You can also follow the QR code if you so choose, which will allow you to enter an address or just click around and look at each individual structure, a side-by-side comparison of the existing structure type, the future structure type, and the heights, and also look at some key locations with the photo simulations. So before and after pictures of what you can expect at key locations along the line. And I do have one within Manassas Park later in this presentation. So specifically, there are 14 structures which we'll replace here in the city. You can see on this map, faintly outlined in sort of that teal color, is the city limits. So the project does pass through the city, but 14 structures within city limits. What marked with the blue squares here are the existing structures, and then the planned structures are in yellow. You might have trouble seeing both of those in some locations because they are so close to each other. Our foundations are just a few feet apart in most cases. However, there are a few variations in the VRE lot and near City Hall where we are tonight. So I'll speak more to that. We are slightly realigning the easement in this area. We're in the process of working through the final mapping and plats for that. That was the request of, as I understand, a former city manager who requested that we move one of those poles up a bit, and so there are a few tweaks to the poles on either side. But that new pole, which you see labeled as structure 27, will move into the roundabout area. It is pretty minor, but we do need to revise the easements there, so that process is underway. And then the other, what you see here is one of those before and after photo simulations that I mentioned. So you can see the existing conditions on the top, what you see today, and then the proposed conditions, you see where that pole is shifted into the median there. The other key area in the city is Blooms Park. So we do have the line, of course, passing through the park, and we will have some impacts during construction. One of the major impacts is that we will have a brief portion of the trail that'll need to be closed while we're working in that area just for safety, and so our crews and vehicles can get back to access the right-of-way in that area. Of course, we'll have signage in place, and we're coordinating closely with Steve and his team to make sure that that is available for park users, that no one gets stranded back on that part of the trail. With that, we also identified in our access reviews prior to the project that there were some areas where stormwater management plans could be improved. We notified Steve and his team of that and are working with them to design a new solution which will help us during the construction process, but which we intend to leave in place and turn over to the city for their ongoing maintenance to make sure that that improvement continues beyond the project. And then the other improvement which we're planning to make is repaving some of the trails within the project area. Not all of the trails, but just the ones that are closest and potentially impacted by this project. We'll just be refinishing those. And of course, if there are any other damages to the park, we'll clean those up prior to leaving the area. So this project, as Steve mentioned, we began coordination in 2022. We filed for State Corporation Commission approval in spring of 2023 and received that in the fall of 2023. So since then, we've been preparing for construction, which did include a community meeting in July of 2024. We also shared notifications to all residents within 1,000 feet of the project, so folks were aware of the planned work. We began installing temporary access mats and flagging danger trees, which are trees that have the potential to fall within 10 feet of the rebuilt line, which of course poses a safety risk for the transmission line. So that began last month. And then our transmission line construction will begin at the western end of the project outside Cannon Branch Substation next week. So that will continue for several months. We don't reach the City of Manassas Park portion of the transmission line until next spring. And then overall construction will be complete by the end of 2025, followed by restoration of impacted work areas, like I mentioned. We do have some resources for residents, so for information in both English and Spanish, our website is listed up here. That's where the QR code will direct folks. It features that structure height comparison tool, which I mentioned before, as well as some additional information on our legal process, maps, construction timelines, that sort of thing. We also have a construction portal for folks to really dig into the process. That URL is also listed. And then, of course, folks are welcome to reach out to our team for specific questions about their property or just general questions with our email and call. Well, that was really it. So I'm happy to take your questions.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Mensing?
Thanks for the presentation. I'm assuming the part of Blooms Park that will be closed is that whole area that's going to be along the railroad tracks where your lines are?
So I'll ask Hannah, who's our permitter on this, to step up. But I believe it's just where our access overlaps.
Right. So right where Jenna has the cursor is where a lot of our access, which is this green line right here.
Mm-hmm.
So your trails are all the yellow lines. This is where we're going to be really the overlap is right up here, which is right between structures 20 and 19. That is where the trail is currently going to be impacted the most. We will definitely coordinate with the park for any other areas that the park feels like needs to be closed during our construction period, but that's the main area. They're not going to be able to pass through during our construction time period.
Okay. And will trees need to be cleared?
So our team is in the process of evaluating that. There's no, like, the trees that would need to be cleared are those danger trees which pose a potential risk to the lines. Our easements typically also indicate that we can clear trees for access. I don't believe our team has identified those yet.
No, so anything like in Blooms Park, we should have adequate access throughout. But again, like Jenna mentioned, for danger trees along our easement, that would be different and then found out in the coming months.
Okay. So you're gonna be driving back this green line to get over there?
Correct.
Oh.
So there's a different, there's two, you see like the two green lines, so the one coming up
Right.
along the line and then the one that sort of loops over at the top
Right,
to get
so
to those different structures.
There's this one as well. We did this option to avoid impacts to the stream. And so in order to avoid that impact, we had to come all the way around to go this way. So yes, there are 2 points. This one will be staying within our easement, and then this one is where we'll get to our easement and then come around.
How big is the vehicle that you'll be bringing back there?
It's gonna vary. It could be bucket trucks, it could be regular trucks. It'll also be cranes, because we'll be bringing in our material this way as well.
Okay. Okay, so you don't anticipate a whole lot of trees needing to be taken out along this long green line to get a bucket truck through?
So we're gonna have at least a 15 to 20 foot wide access. And again, we'll restore as much as is agreed upon beforehand to make it as much as it was beforehand as we can.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
And if I may, Commissioner Mensing, this is Steve again. When we began negotiating and working with Dominion on this, their easement does run along the tracks, which, they do, as mentioned, have the rights from their easement to go ahead and access and clear as needed. The stormwater, the stream impacts were mentioned, but the concern about clearing trees was also an issue. So Dominion did approach us with the potential of kind of taking a path of lesser resistance, if you will, kind of directly through the park. We did a site visit with Jay Swisher, Parks and Rec Director. There is actually kind of a clear-cut 15 to 20 foot swath that has been used in the past for emergency access in the event of an injury in the back of the park where we could get there quicker. That is the area, I believe, that's anticipated Dominion would access with their vehicles and trucks. They also, and this was discussed at length internally, but there's also going to be matting and other types of, I don't know, Jenna, you guys might have to help me here, but other types of fabric and items installed on the ground level to protect some of the environment and the natural condition of the park itself. So we're not envisioning any trees coming down unless they're interfering with Dominion's lines.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Just a quick question.
Commissioner Beckett.
Sorry, this is for staff. What's the communication plan? This is a pretty sort of significant time, spring through summer, early fall. What's the communication sort of horizon for the community for like the expected sort of downtime for the park?
That is a good question, Mr. Commissioner. This has been another topic of discussion with Dominion. They did have a public meeting, I want to say, was it July 15th? It was over, gosh, you're going to have to refresh my memory again, but it was over off Manassas Avenue. We did share some of that information on the city website. There is another presentation at the governing body meeting. I do envision that additional information will be going out to the public via the city website as well as social media platforms. At this time, the city itself does not have a planned public meeting. However, that can certainly be something we look into and coordinate with Dominion. I know that the closure of the park, certainly, or portions of the trail was always a concern of the city as well as the Parks and Rec Director. But Dominion has assured us that there'll be ample signage and markings as to where the trail can and cannot be accessed. I know I've received some maps and plans from Dominion that kind of detail where those areas are going to be. But I know we will have to continue coordinating closely as they move from the VRE, which would be the first area that's worked on in the first quarter of 2025, into the park. Into the spring and summer, I guess Q2, Q3, Hannah. But yeah, that's something we still need to coordinate closely on, and there is nothing saying that we cannot revisit this, you know, when the plans are completed and ironed out. As mentioned, we still they're still undergoing some plan updates. They're looking at the stormwater BMP. You know, there will be some other, you know, memorandums of understanding, if you will, with the city regarding access and things of that nature. So I totally understand the comment. I think it's necessary that the public's informed, particularly when it comes with regard to closing of the trails.
Thank you.
Commissioner Petak?
Yes, have a couple questions. I assume that the costs for this project are being borne entirely by Dominion Energy, correct?
The costs for this project, as for any transmission project, are borne by the Virginia rate base.
Okay, they're in your rates to customers. Gotcha.
Correct.
Understood. And the stormwater control measures and trail repaving, I assume that's going to leave those assets in the condition that they are. They're going to restore them into the condition that they are currently, or it will be an upgrade, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I think from our perspective, it would be a bit of an upgrade. But Steve and his team have looked at that as well. We've had a few conversations about what exactly the preferred stormwater control measure would be, and the agreements of leaving that in place. So that's still a conversation, but that is our intention, that it is making things better off for the city after the project.
Great, thank you. And then, just to get it on the record for this meeting, I know you've probably addressed this in the outreach meetings that you've had with the public, but what level of disruption do you expect for our community? That's the first question I have. And then the second one is, can you spell out any direct benefits of this project for Manassas Park residents?
Sure, thank you. I think the level of disruption in general, it's going to be visible. You're going to see and hear construction, and for the most part, the concentration is in Blooms Park, so the trail impacts for folks who enjoy using that trail loop, there will be impacts there. Other than that, it's sort of just general construction. We do have, permits for construction entrances, but we don't have any significant traffic impacts or other impacts. We have protections in place for our environmental controls. So it's really just some slight construction, noise, visuals, and then the trail closures for the most part. The benefits, we spoke a little bit about the stormwater control measures and the trail improvements, and in general, it goes back to the reliability of our electric grid, which doesn't feel very tangible until the lights don't come on. So we're doing everything we need to get ahead of that. That's not at risk, and this project is an important step to making sure that it continues to be that way.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. Our next item is a discussion, housing needs assessment, affordable housing. Administrator Barry, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, good evening, Chairman and Planning Commissioners. Thank you for having me virtually tonight. Was not able to be there physically. So I did want to just go over the materials. We were asked by the chairman to do some comparison of our needs assessment recommendations based on other jurisdictions in the area. And so that is what the materials you have in front of you do. The narrative portion was kind of a summary of Virginia jurisdictions, DC and Maryland, about what their anticipated affordable housing needs are. You'll see several very large numbers, so it's quite clear that all jurisdictions in the DMV really do anticipate a greater need for affordable housing. And so I did want to thank Kyle our intern, Kyle Petak, our intern, who prepared the written narrative for us. And I think that's quite helpful, and I really appreciate his efforts, and he did a great job. The second part is kind of a easy comparison between the jurisdictions. That's attachment B, and what was done was a comparison of what the recommendations were in the housing assessment, which is the first column. Those were all what was listed in the housing needs survey, and comparing them to other jurisdictions. Now, upon review, I did find a few errors, so I will correct those and send the corrected chart to everyone. But I did want to kind of talk through some of these programs and highlight some of what other jurisdictions are doing. And I did just focus on the Virginia jurisdictions, since they, we follow basically all the same rules as we're a Dillon Rule state. So what you'll see is the preserving existing affordable housing, having housing rehabilitation programs and emergency repair, along with code enforcement efforts. Those clearly across the board are things that all jurisdictions are doing. A lot of that is through the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant. I know they do have grants for home repair, especially for seniors, and all jurisdictions have a code enforcement effort, and it is always everyone's goal to try to preserve the existing affordable housing the stock that they have now. And there's various efforts underway for that, and I think some of those are listed in the narrative portion. So moving on, the encouraging low-income housing tax credit, that's known as LIHTC. It's the abbreviation for that program. It's where developers can get loans at a cheaper rate, but the development or the units have to be affordable for a certain long period of time. I'm not exactly sure what the years are, but there is a cap to that. So I just want, everybody does have low-income housing tax credit developments. We do. Our Park Place Senior Apartments is a LIHTC community, and that is for people who are 55 years and older who meet certain income requirements. I did want to mention that Prince William County, I put R as recommended. I would note that they actually did just broke ground earlier this year for Jefferson Plaza, which is a 240 unit affordable housing development, and that is being developed on a former Woodbridge shopping center. So moving on, clearly every jurisdiction has a need for affordable housing for seniors. We all know that the population is aging, and affordable senior housing is a great concern to many communities, and especially all of the communities in the DMV. So most of them, if they don't have programs currently, or several of the counties have various developments that have senior housing that are affordable. And if they don't have current programs or they're working towards it, it's certainly recommended in their comprehensive plan or other housing documents. I just also wanted to touch on accessory dwelling units. Now, that is a program, it's actually a zoning requirement or regulation. So typically an accessory dwelling unit can be either inside a home, like typically it's in the basement, or it could be a separate structure in the back, a smaller structure. that most jurisdictions do have accessory dwelling unit ordinances. I know recently Arlington revised their regulations to make it easier for people to establish those. And I would note that the city of Falls Church is currently reviewing their standards as well, so that people don't have to go through a lot of processes to establish these units. So that is certainly one way the Virginia jurisdictions are trying to address the affordable housing need. Next, we have what is for allowing more affordable units in the single-family neighborhoods. This is known as missing middle housing. It's kind of referred to that, and what it is so there would not be a exclusive single-family detached residential zone. So, meaning that you would be able to build units from 1 to up to 6, and it depends on the size of the lot and the zoning district, but to have a more variety of housing so you wouldn't just have a zoning district that's exclusive single-family detached. That is recommended in a few jurisdictions, Fairfax County, Prince William County, and Loudoun County. But I will tell you, Arlington and the city of Alexandria have passed these missing middle programs, and I know there are a few developments underway in Arlington. It's a bit controversial, and so we will see how that, if other jurisdictions follow suit, and see if that's where the Northern Virginia jurisdictions are heading to. But we do have two cities, well, our county and Alexandria City, they have that program. And it's fairly recent, probably within a year or two, that those programs were adopted. There are also several of these I did find interesting. The redeveloping industrial lands for possible conversion. Their jurisdictions are considering that. There's several, if they're not doing it now or have projects, they certainly have that in their comprehensive plan. I know the city of Falls Church has been looking at certain areas that are industrial, and part of their comp plan identifies that for redevelopment for residential, and including affordable housing. So I did also want to mention having the government-owned property being sold and developed for affordable units. So meaning that the local government actually owns the property and they are either selling it or a portion of it to help with the affordable housing need. Manassas Park just did that last night, that they approved a prospective development, that rezoning that will be coming our way for some affordable units, 9, and I'll speak on that more at the end of the presentation. So we are participating in that. So that is certainly a step for us in the right direction for affordable housing. And another example is the residences at Government Center in Fairfax County. There are 270 units there. That was government-owned property, and those are 270 affordable units that are available for county employees and other residents in the county who meet the certain income requirements. So there certainly are examples of that in the Northern Virginia area. And there's only three more I want to touch on. Co-locating affordable units with city facilities. I think that we did possibly look at that perhaps as part of the downtown development, but there are certain jurisdictions that that are pursuing this, and certainly it's recommended for all jurisdictions. I believe the city of Falls Church is a bit landlocked and doesn't have a lot of city property to redevelop, so they're not really pursuing this. But in Fairfax County, there is the Franconia Government Center redevelopment project that there is so it would be county offices currently there, but as part of this redevelopment, they're going to add 120 affordable units. So that is county property being developed in concert with county offices, but also affordable units. Another example is Arlington Mill Residences, which is co-located on public land with the Arlington Mill Community Center. There will be 122 affordable units there. And the most interesting one that I found and was researching was coordinating and placing affordable housing on land owned by places of worship. Interestingly, there are several projects in our area that are doing that. And most jurisdictions, either if they're doing it, it's been recommended, or it's not specifically identified in the city of Manassas, the city of Alexandria, or Falls Church. But some examples are in Arlington. There's a Central United Methodist Church that built an 8-story building that accommodates 144 affordable units, but also incorporates a place of worship aspects such as a sanctuary and also an early education program. I thought that was very innovative and a good way of collaboration with the community. We also have in the city of Fairfax, there's something called Glebe View. That's with Fairfax Presbyterian Church. They are building 10 townhomes on their property. 8 will be for people who make between 40 and 80% of the AMI, and then the remaining 2 will be for homeless families who are trying to transition and to become, have a permanent residence. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about the affordable dwelling unit ordinance. Certainly that was recommended for the city, and most jurisdictions already have an affordable dwelling unit ordinance, and if not, it's recommended. Currently, Prince William County is in the process of adopting it. I know it's gone to the Board of Supervisors for a work session, but it doesn't appear that they have yet to adopt it. But it certainly has been to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. I did so, and if just like the city of Manassas, that is something that's recommended. For our city, I wanted to point out that the way it's written in the state code is you have to allow for bonus density as one of the requirements for affordable dwelling unit ordinance. Our zoning ordinance does not have any density requirements, with the exception of 10 townhomes in the R2 district I believe it's per acre. So we can't really avail ourselves of that program in the zoning ordinance as a zoning regulation without changing our zoning ordinance to meet the criteria to have an affordable dwelling unit ordinance. However, as I believe you were speaking before the meeting, the governing body did approve and recommend a affordable workforce dwelling unit policy, housing policy, and that was generated in concert with the sale of the city-owned property that I mentioned for the development that's going to be at the corner of Digital and Manassas Drive. And so I just wanted to highlight a few items for this policy. And so it's my understanding that this development will be all for sale units. So the affordable units will be for sale. There's really two types. One is the affordable dwelling unit, and that's up to people who earn 70% or less of the area median income. And then workforce housing, which is for anybody who meets up to 80% of the AMI, but they also have to be a city employee, such as a teacher, police officer, dispatchers, full-time firefighters, and emergency medical personnel and social workers. Now, it may be also open if we can't fill them. Again, I think we're going to have 9 units, but that's an extra incentive as an employee to come work for the city. The units will be at a reduced price. It will be below market rate. There are some charts in the policy. I'm not going to go into those details, but it's also going to be based on family size and your income as well for the final sale price. I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with affordable dwelling unit, workforce dwelling unit program, but for sale units, they have covenants where it restricts the unit from being sold at a market rate for a period of years. We have chosen 30. So that will be an affordable dwelling unit for 30, or workforce dwelling unit for 30 years. Now, if somebody sells it, then the person who purchases it, that will renew the 30-year requirement. If somebody holds on to the unit for after the 30-year period, they can sell it at a market rate, but half the sale proceeds will go back to the city. I think you get some, the market price, and I think there's some subtractions for closing costs and whatnot. But yes, so those will come, and so we will have a housing trust fund, which was one of the recommendations to do that. So. Is there something else I wanted to mention about? So that's kind of the program in a nutshell. I mean, there's certainly more details to that, but we are going to be, it's my understanding, offering 9 units. I know some of the qualifications in the discussion last evening when the policy was adopted was to give preferential treatment to veterans. I know the discussion also wanted to, on a point system is what is detailed in the policy. They wanted to see to add disabled as well, disabled individuals. And there were some other questions where this policy will be brought back to the governing body for some minor revisions. So it is a bit of a work in progress, but we do have the framework here. So I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to answer any questions, and if needed, Kyle can certainly add his voice if there's some questions that you have that he can handle. Thank you.
Administrator Barry, thank you. Appreciate you having this on the agenda for this evening, and thank you for your presentation. Mr. Petak, thank you for your efforts in compiling the information as well. With questions, Commissioner Beckett's.
Good evening. Thanks for the presentation. It's really helpful. I had one question. I had two questions. One, since you mentioned that there were edits that you were going to make to the chart, is it possible to add the City of Manassas Park here so that way we can actually be able to sort of look and compare to what is in the city against the other jurisdictions? That'd be really helpful. And
Excellent point, yes.
thank you. And then on page 2 of the policy, the workforce dwelling unit section, it lists specific positions or classifications.
Yes.
And what struck me was social workers, and I was just wondering, is that a specific classification that the city has, or is that like a social worker from the school system? Because I know like in DSS we don't use social workers, we use like family services specialists, and I would just wonder if a person works for social services on like the services side, if they're not a social worker, would that actually exclude them by policy as opposed to like really opening it up? And so from that perspective, I was just wondering like why choose classification types that the city may not actually use, and that might get you hemmed up later when a person is thinking, oh, I'm a social worker working in adult services, but they're really a family services specialist by classification type.
Yeah, I will have to research that and get back to you. I interpreted it as people who work for our Department of Social Services, but I'll have to speak with the housing coordinator who helped develop this policy to really understand what that means. I mean, I think we do have positions called social worker 1 and 2 and whatnot, but I will certainly seek clarification on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Petak.
Yes, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Kyle, for the presentation. Great presentation. General question on LIHTC. Is that funding always readily available, or are there some strings attached to it?
Well, I am not a developer. I'm sure, I know it's a program that is used quite often, and even in combination with financing for affordable housing. So it's just, to me, what I understand from my very limited knowledge, it's just another tool to help develop affordable housing projects or developments. And I know a lot of times it's in combination with other, whether it's for a nonprofit group or a developer himself. But I'm not really sure, the ins and outs of the LIHTC. But I'm happy to, find specific answers for you if you have specific questions.
That's fine. It sounds like the onus is more on the developer and not us as the city to secure the funding.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
no.
good. Thank you. And obviously, I remember from the presentation in July that we did have some growth in our senior population, so that those needs are expected to increase. Do you know if our current development, senior development, has the footprint to expand?
I've looked at the site. There is very, very little room. I suppose, we don't have a density. I don't know. I mean, given with the parking, I'm not so sure that would be feasible. But it's a great idea. I think actually there is a 3-acre undeveloped parcel, which is now parkland, but I believe that was actually part of that development. And so maybe there was some intent to build more, but that has passed, and it's only where the site is now. And so that needs to be, to actually add more units, I'm not sure there's really enough room.
Okay. Couple other questions. Am I mistaken that the land that's off of Manassas Drive near Signal Hill Lane is owned by the Catholic Diocese? Is that correct, or am I incorrect on that?
It's not at the corner. The actual parcel at the corner is owned by a individual. But yes, there is a large parcel that is owned by the Diocese of Arlington. It's really where Manassas Drive and Digital Drive meet at the T intersection on the opposite side, where it's vacant land. That's their property, and it runs behind that corner property up into, and it abuts the Merit School as well as the Pet Suites.
And that's in the city of Manassas Park, correct?
Yes, if you want a bit of history, it was not. I believe we brought it into the city with a boundary line adjustment, and believe it or not, I believe it was 2019. But yeah, so that it is a recent addition, but yes, it is within the city boundaries.
Okay, so you probably guessed where I'm driving at here. Do you
Uh-huh.
do you know, or are we aware if the Catholic Diocese has contemplated developing affordable dwelling units on that land?
I do not. I don't know the status of. It's my understanding from speaking to some of the clergy who worked in the city that it intends to be a place of worship as well as a school. I don't know when and if that will ever happen. I know certainly funding's always a big issue. But certainly we have not received any plans. I don't know what the time frame is, but one of the issues is that it would be a by right development, meaning it wouldn't go through a public hearing process. It's zoned A1, and places of worship are allowed by right. So they can just submit a site plan. We would have to enter into conversations with the diocese to see if they would, be willing to add affordable units to that property. I don't know the acreage offhand, but it certainly might be a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Great. Thanks again for the presentation. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
No unfinished business for this evening. No report of special committees. Administrator Barry, informational update from community development staff.
Yes, I just have a few items. Of course, we already touched on this, but with the approval of the sale of the city land, and there's other parcels with it, but we do anticipate a rezoning application coming to us in the next few months, so that will be on our radar. We are still working on the comprehensive plan request for proposal. We have a first draft. I'm trying to finalize the second draft, but we hope to get that to Dean for review and get that out on the street so we can, start that process. So there's a little fine tuning that needs to be done, and of course legal review, but we're almost there, and so I hope to have that on the street hopefully by the end of this month or early next month. And then lastly, I just wanted to pass along that our assistant planner and code enforcement officer, Diane Rivas Plata has resigned and left us. So we're sad to see her go, but we are advertising for that position. So we just wish her well, and she did great work while she was here, and just wanted to extend our appreciation to her, and as well as notify the commission that we do have a vacancy and we're trying to fill it. And that's, I highlight, is there anything, Calvin, that you or Steve would like to add?
Nothing for me. Thanks, Vicki.
Great. Any questions from commissioners? Okay, thanks again. And
You're welcome. Thank you.
with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Motion, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The time is 7:55.